Hi folks, this is Professor K, and we are still in our relationship chapters. And this one specifically, we're talking about chapter 13 in our Introducing Communication Theory book. And chapter 13 is Social Information Processing Theory. And this theory is a little more recent. Actually, a couple of the theories in this section are a little more recent, which is nice. I think sometimes as a scholar of communication, which you guys are, you read some of these theories and you're like, this theory came out in like 1946 or whatever, and is that, I mean, yes, we're still human beings and we haven't changed that much, but the way that we communicate has changed, and the rules that we set up for our relationships have certainly changed. So this is a nice theory because it's a little more recent. And this theory, at a glance, social information processing, says individuals have the ability to establish online relationships, and these relationships are equal to or greater than the intimacy achieved in a face-to-face relationship. So it doesn't pick a side, right? It says we can develop online relationships that are great in their intimacy, or that are not, that are as strong as face-to-face relationships or are not. So it's not really giving you a definitive. It's saying that we can develop these things. And it's saying even without nonverbal cues, which we know are moving my hands around and these things and my vocalics, right? Because we're online. Even without these cues, there's through various technologies, online relationships have the potential to be significant in people's lives. And I counter nonverbal cues being non-existent in online communication, and I think that we have established some means to express ourselves nonverbally in online communication. So maybe you can think of some of the ways that we have sort of fixed the lack of nonverbal cues in our online relationships. So I'll tell you right off the bat, emoticons, right? Emojis. And there's more and more and more of them. And why do we use these emojis? Well, because we're missing something. I want to smile at you. I'm saying something and I want you to know that it needs a smiley face, or it needs me to wink at you. It's sarcastic. I'm winking at you. So what do? I put in a winky face, right? And that's a nonverbal, because there's no words, right? Can you think of other ways? And I'm sure that you can, and I would love for you to share those out with the whole class, because let's all talk about this. If you've had me before, I have probably expressed my theory in life that in 30 years, I don't have a definitive time when I think this is going to happen, but I think it's going to happen, that we will no longer write text, that we will only write in pictures, and we will be going backwards to pictorial. Think about like Egypt and ancient Egyptians, they wrote in pictures. And I have a very strong feeling that we are going to go back there. I don't know when, but when it happens, I hope that you're like, Professor K said this was going to happen, and it did. Okay, anyway, off that tangent. So social information processing theory says we can have relationships online. They can be good, they can be strong, they can be as strong as face-to-face, or perhaps not as strong as face-to-face. And there's some ways to think about it. So one way is impression management. And we've talked about this before. This textbook talks about this, and it'll come up again. And impression management is the way that we manage ourselves and who we want people to think that we are. So how do you manage people's impressions of you on Instagram? What do you do on Snapchat? You've got these lovely filters. You look fabulous because of the filter that you've set up for yourself, right? That's that's impression management, right? I look really good here. But also in text, right? So there's things that we post out. There's pages that we like. And sure, it's because we like these things and we want to share that information. But two, it's because we want to send out a message about ourselves, right? I follow a lot of other communication scholars, a lot of professors on Twitter. I follow like journals and things like that. And sure, it's because I want to get their information, I want to read what they have to say, but also it makes me look like I'm somebody who's in the thick of scholarship, right? That I'm in the know, that I care about these journals and things like that, right? That's an impression I'm trying to send out there to other people. Think about the things that you do. Actual self are the attributes a person possesses. So we have this impression that we want people to get from us. I want you all to think that I'm a good professor. I want you all to think that I'm like genuine and I have like a credibility to me and I'm ethical. But how do I actually feel about myself? Some days I go into class and I'm like, man, I am the worst. I'm the worst professor ever. I didn't explain that well. I got confusing looks. I suck at this, right? And we all have those days, right? Anything that you do as a student, as a whatever job that you do, and sometimes we think about this phenomenon called the imposter syndrome, where you think I'm just an imposter. So that's some things that that are attributed to our actual self, and our ideal self is who I really want people to think I am and who I really want to be. I want to be an awesome professor. I want to be super good at my job, right? Don't we all want to have an ideal version of ourselves? And our ought self, the attributes a person should possess. So what do I think a good professor should possess? I've had good professors. I have currently good professors, smart, well-read, well-spoken. I think I say the word like too much as a professor, and a professor ought not to use the word like all the time. And when I catch myself saying it, try to stop, because this is me, right? So what is the deal with this social information processing theory? This theory posits the extent to which people can form relationships based on this version of themselves that they put out there online. And we are specifically talking through computer-mediated communication, which is oftentimes just called CMC. And this theory says that we talk sometimes synchronously. So synchronously is like if you're talking on Skype, if you're chatting, like Google chatting with somebody, that would be synchronous. Asynchronous is right now, right? So I'm making this video for you and you are picking this video up later. So you can't raise your hand and I can answer it, because that's synchronous. Asynchronous says it happens at a different time, right? So how does this affect our relationships? If it's synchronous, it's like in real time. So you can ask me real questions. We can have a real dialogue. Asynchronous, I have a lot of time to think about my response to you, right? So think about a nasty email that you got, and sometimes you just like reply right away. And even that is not quite synchronous. That's still asynchronous because they're getting it maybe like a few minutes later. Texting back and forth, I think that's actually a challenging one. If you're going really back and forth with somebody and having a conversation, then maybe we consider that synchronous. If I text you and you text me a half an hour later, that's asynchronous, right? That's happening at a later time. So how does that affect your relationships? If I have time to sit there and think about, very calculated, my response to you, then am I being genuine? I mean, I am. But if I was standing in front of you, would I have the same time to think very much about how I'm going to respond to you? Am I the best words that I could use? So that's a part of this theory, right? So time, think about how you can form relationships online, and they might be more intimate than face-to-face. So I said on the one hand, there's this time problem, right? There's this chronemic time problem. I talk, you write me an hour and a half later, but sometimes you write me like a week later over email or Facebook, right? If you post a comment on Facebook and I don't comment back, or on Instagram or whatever, I don't tweet back at you for a day. I mean, it's like there's a struggle to connect, right? I wanted to talk to you. I wanted you to come back to me, and you didn't for a week. And think about like your text messages. Why didn't you text me right back? You're breaking my heart. I just want to have a conversation with you. So there's a struggle to connect. But the converse of that is this idea of this hyper-personal perspective, which says that people actually sometimes they can be more intimate. So that very same time lapse gives me the opportunity to think carefully about what I want to share with you, and I can share greater information with you. I also feel like, well, when there's a computer between us, maybe I'm not as fearful to disclose. So thinking about some privacy management, I feel like I can tell you this, like I don't see your face looking like if I'm telling you some really private information, and so maybe I think it's okay to share more with you. So this hyper personal perspective says I'm going to get closer to you even though we have this computer in the way of us. Online dating, I think, is a nice way to think about this as well. When I am dating or I'm meeting somebody online, on the one hand, maybe I can't get close to them because I'm not seeing them and I don't get their nonverbals and things like that. But on the other hand, I feel like I can share more. And I can be maybe like a kind of good version of me, which comes with problems, right? And we talked about catfishing in another section of this class, and I think that's important to think about, right? So I'm getting super, super close to you, and then like, I don't even know who you are, right? I don't even know how you look, or you say you look a certain way, and then you turn out to not look a certain way. So there's a lot to this theory, and I think it's a good one. I like this theory a lot, and I think we live in a time where it's really applicable. We form a lot of relationships online. 1/3 of marriages start through online dating sites now. That's a lot, and that's only going to get greater and greater and greater. So think about how you form relationships online. Are they close? Are they not close? Are you closer with some folks online? I know from a personal perspective, I moved away from my friends about 10 and 11 years ago or so when I left New York where I grew up. And some of those people, I feel like I've gotten closer with them just because I text them every other day, or some friends I text 20 times a day. And if I lived close to them, I don't know if I would do that as much. And email too. So a lot of tenets to this theory, social information processing theory. If you have any questions on it, please let me know.